What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock, what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis and give you guys my price prediction for tomorrow based off the charts are showing and based off the data is suggesting. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the Fed, some big news affecting NIO, and also what the data is showing for NIO's future. Now, before I break anything down, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so don't take any of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. Not only benefits me, it benefits the entire new community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Weeble link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Weeble, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any of these 12 free stocks could be a free NIO or Tesla share. It's limited time offer. The offer ends tomorrow, so please check it out before they run out. There's only one day left. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Looking at NIO, this thing was down about 2.91% for the day on Friday, but we are a little bit green in the after hours, and I am anticipating some more of a push to the upside after being so oversold over the last couple of weeks. Now, if we look at NIO's chart from a more macro perspective, zooming out, I did mention like the two main possibilities previously, but we can actually close these. I want to actually talk about something else that's important. So instead of just looking at what the FOMC meeting could cause, I also want to talk specifically about tomorrow and what's going on in the markets. NIO has been very oversold over the last few weeks, like I mentioned. But what you could see right here is we have a very long wick down here that actually takes us to that $8 range. And since then, NIO appears to see a nice bounce. So what I'm hoping is, hopefully this was a temporary bottom for NIO, and if the market continues to rally for the next 2 or so weeks, that's going to be a good sign for NIO to start pushing up and maybe start to make those higher highs and higher lows. For us to get that confirmation, this needs to be our bottom. We need to get a push up like this, come down and make a higher low right here, then continue, get a new high, come down, and just continue with the pattern going up over and over again. So I'm hoping that NIO does follow this trend, and I am more optimistic, so I do believe that is what's going to happen. But for confirmation, we need to see NIO bounce and continue pushing. We need to see this thing start rocketing to the upside. I want to see this thing approach the $10 range. And also, we do have some gaps all the way up here. We have many gaps around the 10.8 range, in the 12s and the 15s. So I'm hoping NIO starts to push up with the market. So what's going on with the week that's coming up for the markets? Well, we have FOMC very soon, between November 1st and the 2nd. And it's also important to note that what Jerome Powell says is going to have a very big effect on the markets, which will affect NIO. I'm going to show you exactly how. So Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Fed, he's going to be making some big announcements about how the Fed is going to use their open market operations to change their policies. If the Fed is not hinting at a pivot, they remain very aggressive, they become very stubborn and abrasive, the market could reverse. But if the Fed is very quiet and very careful with their words, and they don't necessarily hint at, like not pivoting or like not being like way too aggressive, for instance, that would be a very, very good sign for the market. If the Fed does make it seem like they're getting ready to like pivot or like slow down with the rate hikes over the next few months, that's also going to be a good sign, because if you look at CME Group, the market is almost fully priced in a 75 basis point rate hike already. It's about 80% priced in already. So even if we do get a 75 basis point rate hike, the market could come down a bit temporarily, maybe for like a day or two, but then all of a sudden we could see a big bounce and start continuing to push up. That's why FOMC is very important. However, until FOMC comes, I am anticipating that the market is going to continue to rally for the next few days, given the previous trends, which I'm about to show you. Now, on the options chain for NIO, looking at the next one that's coming up for November, we could see that on November 4th, NIO's max pain is at about $10 a share. Now, this doesn't have to be where NIO stays forever. It's dependent on the market. If the market continues to pump, this could get adjusted. It's also important to note that the majority of retail and investors are still loaded into like calls for NIO. They may be kind of over leveraged, which is part of the reason why NIO came down. But there's also hope that if the market pushes up and NIO starts to push up too, some of the shorts may start to cover their positions. Because if I come down here and look at the short interest, it was crazy high over the last few days when NIO came down. The shorts brought this thing down, and starting to come down a bit. So hopefully more shorts start to close some more positions as the market pushes up, and this could actually improve circumstances for NIO. It's also important to note that from a fundamental standpoint, NIO is still very, very strong. I mean, we're seeing Citigroup, we're seeing Barclays Bank. This just came out a couple of days ago saying NIO is going to outperform the market. They're still very bullish. Buy NIO now while it's cheap, in their opinion. Now, it's also important to note that historically, NIO is actually green about 49% of the time on Mondays, so it's almost 50-50. And I'm a little bit more optimistic. I'm hoping we see a green day for tomorrow. And on top of that, from a historical basis, 52% of the time, this is the percentage of times that NIO closed green in November. It's about 53% of the time, actually. NIO is green in November. So November tends to be a better month for NIO historically. I'm hoping that we see a big improvement during that month. Now, it's also important to note, looking at how NIO compares to the overall market, the market has been pumping up more and NIO has been kind of lagging behind with a low price pairs ratio. But it's not just the market doing this, it's also the QQQ. If you look at how NIO is comparing to the QQQ and the Nasdaq, very similar trend right here. We can see both of them have been on kind of like coming down. This is because tech stocks in this market are kind of lagging behind the S&P 500. This is what's happening, at least for the short term. We could see a big improvement though as time goes on. Now, I also want to note two more important announcements. NIO has earnings on November 8th. So I think there are going to be some very serious talks about what's going on in China, how the political climate may affect NIO. And I think a lot of investors are going to be paying very close attention to what is said regarding that news. There's also going to be a lot of talk about the lockdowns, the change in demand in the country, how inflation is affecting their margins and things like that. So I'm going to be very, very cautious when looking at this day. It could have a big effect on NIO too. Now, if the market is pumping up, right, that could help NIO pump up. There's a chance NIO could start to go up in value approaching earnings, but we'll have to wait and see for confirmation after FOMC first. On top of that, there was another big piece of news that came out that did affect NIO. It's the fact that in Shanghai, we are seeing more of these lockdowns. This is not the best of things for NIO or Tesla or any EVs because their production facilities tend to be very close to Shanghai. And the slowdown in demand for the city itself could slow down their means of deliveries and things like that. However, what's good about this is so far there's no confirmation that the the Giga Shanghai or even like NIO's Gigafactories or anything like that. None of these things have been affected as of right now, according to the news. So right now, things are fine when it comes to production. I'm hoping this continues as time goes on. So what does this all mean for the share price for NIO? Well, in my opinion, NIO is still very oversold. If you look at the daily and we bring up our, let me see, MACD and RSI, I'm seeing some good signs here, guys. So the RSI on the daily being below that 30 mark, it's at 28 right now. That's a sign of it being oversold. The MACD has been coming down, but if you look at the trend, NIO was basically dropping hard, very, very hard over the last few weeks. But now, as of recent, it's not dropping as hard as before. It's looking like we're getting closer to our like temporary bottom, and we're getting ready to bounce around here because the MACD is coming down. Look at how this was very wide before. We were just, free falling. We were coming down and down and down hard, and now we're not dropping as hard. The MACD is getting tighter, and we're getting very close to a potential crossover right here on the MACD, which is often a signal of a nice push and a shift in momentum. So that's a sign that NIO might start pushing up a bit temporarily. I'm hoping for that. It is also dependent on the overall market as well, guys. It's very dependent on what comes out involving the news and the FOMC meeting. But I am personally anticipating that the market's going to pump up approaching FOMC. Then we're going to move depending on what is announced. So with my biases aside, what I think could happen to NIO because of that, NIO has potential to start pushing up because you could see NIO has a lot of gaps up here where we were very oversold. And there's a sign right here that we're starting to make some higher lows. Like I mentioned, the previous low we made a couple of days ago, NIO came all the way down to the eights. We pushed up, we retraced a bit. We're starting to bounce from here. I'm hoping for a nice continuation and a push for higher highs and higher lows from this point on. This means that NIO should start to pump up from here, in my opinion, because the QQQ is kind of like lagging behind. I'm not seeing NIO just like pumping 20% in a day, but I could see this thing slowly starting to uptrend from here, and that's what I'm essentially hoping for. For tomorrow, this is what I'm essentially predicting. I'm hoping that we get a nice strong open. NIO comes all the way back to this $10 level of resistance. We retest it for some time, just like this. and we're going to fight it, and we're eventually going to break it, in my opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if NIO continues to break past it, push, push, push for $10.41. We have resistance right there. As you guys can see right here, we had like previous resistance. We got some rejections here. I'm hoping that NIO retests this, maybe comes down and slowly holds the 10.2 to 10.25 zone and slowly makes these higher lows, holds up pretty well and starts to consolidate in this range, we'd be in a very good place approaching the FOMC meeting. So tomorrow would be Halloween in the USA. I'm hoping that this would be pretty decent for NIO. And then on top of that, for November 1st, I'm hoping for another bullish continuation going into FOMC. So that's what I think might end up happening to NIO. I'm more bullish than bearish, at least for the short term. However, just in case there's some big news in like Shanghai, something else happens in China, something we don't expect, I want to talk about retracement zones and support zones just to be safe. So right now, NIO is currently at about $9.69. We're at like 9.73 in the after hours. Now, the first major support that we have is around 9.64 or so, very close to where we are. Come below that, then 9.28 to 9.3 is going to be support, followed by the $9 range all the way right here. And then after that comes the $8.38 range. There isn't really like a clear bounce zone. It looks like we came down very hard and bounced from there. So in my opinion, guys, I don't see NIO really coming back down below 9 for the short term. I think we're more likely to just push up. I just wanted to warn you guys just in case things don't go our way. So for tomorrow, I'm predicting a more bullish move. I want to see this thing retest $10, break past it, hit 10.4, hold that, and kind of like hold up pretty well for tomorrow. That's my prediction, guys. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon, because the long-term future is still incredibly bright, and peace out.